It is necessary for the recording of sound to convert the sound waves to corresponding changes in light. The sound waves produced by my voice are transmitted through the air to the microphone, where these sound waves are converted to changes in an electric current. These variations in the electric current are then amplified and used to control the light. This varying beam of light falling on the photoelectric cell produces variations in the electric current, which are directly proportional to the variations in the light beam. The sound track. As the varying electrical current in the photoelectric cell is small, a vacuum tube amplifier is required to increase it to the point where it will operate a loudspeaker. Soundtrack.
What is up, everyone, and welcome to the Occult Rejects. Today, we got a packed house going on over here. We got pretty much like a cult true crime party going on today, for Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I wasn't able to really go live on Friday, and I know I've been trying to do at least one live a week, so I took advantage of all of these people being available today to talk about, true crime and occult. I do love my true crime, and I do like to look at it from an occult aspect. I know have covered a bunch of episodes on Idaho 4. I may not have gone into the occult concept as much, but I do put a little bit here and there. But it is a thing that I have been looking at a lot lately, and I did the Gilgo Beach series with Lisa, and that was, that whole thing was an occult topic. And I do think that some of the crimes that we are seeing in front of us are possibly mimicking or even like mocking or whatever other occult tales or ideas. And somebody who's very big into that and I actually have to say has impressed me because knows things that I haven't really gotten into in my, cult career, and has pointed out things to me that I was like, damn, I got to start looking into birth charts now. Never thought of that. So we got a returning guest, too, who was also, I got a lot of good feedback on that episode, to tell you the truth. I was a little surprised because I know true crime isn't a huge thing for the Occult Rejects, but I did have a bunch of comments and people who actually personally hit me up and actually told me they thought that was an amazing episode. So I cannot be happier to bring back BD Salerno again. Before we get to her, though, and let her plug everything, I do have Teresa, and I got Lisa with me. So, Teresa, why don't you go first and let everybody know who you are in that amazing podcast you do every Tuesday?
Well, sure. Thanks for having me on the Occult Rejects. I'm excited for this episode. I think it'll be a really cool chat. But yes, I do have another show with you called The Spiritual Gangsters. And every week lately, we've been on like a news binge, so we do something called Clown World Weekly every Tuesday, usually in the morning. But we go live on YouTube and Rumble, and we just make fun of the news, basically. Not even make fun, but just like break it down, discuss it from our perspective. And I think it's something I really like because I was maybe going to be a journalist, but it's not cool enough for me. This form of journalism suits me much better. So yeah, you can check that out.
Nice. And it's I really truly do enjoy doing that show, and I really do like the format. I think it's a well done show. So go check it out if there's people who haven't heard it yet. The links are in the bottom. And Lisa, thank you very much for coming on. I know, at this point, you're an occult reject anyway. So, I guess that is the podcast you can plug. But do you want to, plug any of your social or anything?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't hardly post. I'm more of a lurker.
She's wearing a nice hat, though.
Yeah. But I will like to plug this beautiful, comfortable, very couture beanie that
Thank you.
The wonderful Teresa handmade.
There you go.
Thank you.
And they're on sale.
Woohoo!
You're too funny.
Go check them out.
Yes, definitely go check that out too, for real. The hats are great. I have one as well. So yeah, the links you can
They're
find
fun.
that probably through her links that are in the bottom.
Yeah.
But even the other reason, Lisa, and then we'll finally get to the show. The only reason I was saying anything about stuff that you plug, I mean, you get into a lot of the science on the Occult
do.
Rejects, and there may be people who are into that as well. And maybe
post
they
some
might
stuff on Twitter.
Well, I was saying they might have something to maybe add that they heard you cover on the Occult Rejects, and they can message you and add. I don't know.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, if you want to look me up on Twitter at my name, Lisa Solis, with a Z, both Z's. And I tend to, if there's something that pops up that's scientific or whatever that, I want to put my 2 cents in, I'll put in or whatever. Or something that's like doesn't seem right and I want to, I don't know, correct it.
Yeah, well, just
I'll
even
put
for what you
something
do on
on.
the show. You know what I'm saying? For
Yeah,
people listening on the show and things that she's covered. If there's people out there that are educated in those areas as well and think that you have something to add that she would understand that I won't, hit her up and let her know.
Yes.
All right. So now back to the guest, finally. BD Salerno, thank you so much for coming back on again. This probably will be a 2-part series. And in all honesty, this is probably a guest that I would like to have on repeatedly every so often. So why don't you let everybody know, just in case for the people that don't know who you are yet, who you are, what your deal is, and let them know about the books that you have done as well, please.
Well, thanks for having me on, Nick, and hi, everybody. I am still figuring out who I am, but right now I am an astrologer and an author of several books. My first book was called Forensics by the Stars. I started working with the astrology of crime about 20 years ago and decided to put that book out, not because I really consider myself an expert, but there was a lack of information in that area of astrology, and I was learning a lot by working on certain types of horoscopes concerning crimes. Few years after that, I put out Exploring Forensic Astrology, where I went more into the astrology of crime of famous people so that people could relate to the work I was doing. They would know the person that was concerned, mostly celebrities, famous people. And then just this year, I released a totally different book, which was basically a crime investigation, Richard Speck and the 8 Nurses Deconstructing a Mass Murder, which had nothing to do with astrology. It was something that personally had piqued my interest, and I spent 3 years working on that case and writing the book. Of course, being an astrologer, I noticed all these occult references in the crime by Richard Speck, which I actually do not believe was committed by Richard Speck. But anyway, there were a number of occult references. I did a big astrological workup of the crime. And so that was followed up by a book I just put out last month, which is Desperate Rights, Astrology and the Occult in the Richard Speck Murders. And right now I'm working actually on another book, which is going to be sort of autobiographical. My life is seen through the astrology of the planets and things that have happened to me. And I don't know when that's coming out. I thought it'd be out already, so I'm not going to go out on a limb with that one. But that one probably maybe early next year, because my purpose is to get more people interested in astrology and what it can offer people. There are so many facets to it. So going through true crime is mainly because I'm a true crime fanatic, and it works so well with true crime. Anyway, that being said, my Twitter handle is Star Sleuth. I have a website, strangebuttruecrime.com, which is about true crime, but also the occult influences in true crime, and all just general weirdness that seems to follow true crime around. And that's pretty much it for my description right now.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And like I was saying before, and it's something that like I even still forget now to look at whenever I do kind of like start looking at some true crime stuff. The whole birth chart thing really blew me away with thinking about that. Because like I'm even wondering like if you could start following some certain things, and like for all you know, you'd be like, wow, this is always in the same house every time this happens, or something like that.
you do see patterns, because actually when you're looking at crime, and I'm talking about generational crime, I'm not talking about a robbery down the street, a crime that affects the mass consciousness. When you start digging under there, there are patterns over and over again. I saw it with Richard Speck because I was a child of the 60s, and I remember JFK and Sirhan, and all those were patsy crimes, and there was a discernible pattern. So I think once you dig a rabbit hole deep enough, you're going to find all different ways that they crisscross and intersect. And that's why I wrote the second book on the Richard Speck case. There were so many crisscrossing patterns. I mean, there was Chicago and Dallas, and New Orleans was all over the place. And that occurred also with the Kennedy assassination, and the fact that Richard Speck knew Jack Ruby, and there's just so many rabbit holes crisscrossed. Anyway, you do see the patterns in the crime charts as well. And where you see them a lot is in not just the planets, but in what we call the fixed stars. The fixed stars really are the stars. They're fixed because they move so much more slowly than the planets do. And they form patterns in the sky, which we recognize as constellations. And the ancients recognized these patterns and built myths and stories around people that they saw in these different patterns of stars. And there's not just people. There are animals, there are birds, there are fish, there's a serpent. There's all kinds of bodies in the sky to which the fixed stars belong. And they all have a particular meaning that is played out through their myth. And when I started to discover fixed stars in crime charts, it actually gave me the chills because it was so descriptive of what was going on. So I thought it would be interesting to share with people several of the cases that I worked on, what the star was, what the myth behind it was, what it meant in terms of the crime, because they are freaky accurate. I mean, you will see as I start to describe them.
I love it.
They are freaky accurate. So I'll start with, I just want to back up a little bit why I'm so into astrology. The first reason is that I was always really good with languages, and astrology is a language. You have symbols for the planets, symbols for the signs. And I was really, growing up, my mother's side of the family was Ukrainian. I mean, I'm Italian. Salerno is Italian, but my other half is Ukrainian. And my grandmother had this Russian Bible from like the 1800s. It was very ornate, beautifully decorated. It was leather bound, and it was all in Russian, in the Cyrillic alphabet. And I was so fascinated by this Bible, I taught myself to read the Russian alphabet. So I can read Russian. I don't understand what the hell I'm reading, but I can phonetically read the Russian language because I taught myself the alphabet. And it's similar. The planets are the same. They are symbols, because I love symbolism. So astrology is a language that the astrologer doesn't just translate. You have to interpret what you're seeing. You're interpreting what all these things mean, how they fit together. And what you're really looking at in the birth chart or the chart of any event is it's a circle, 360 degrees, divided into 12 houses, which are the 12 houses of experience in the person's life. You have the person, their values and possessions, their communication and travel, family, children, health and illness, partnerships, death, inheritance, taxes, travel, higher education. You have career, friends, goals, and ambitions. And then the 12th house is kind of dark and secretive. It's sort of like the house of hidden things. And it can be witchcraft, it can be secrets, it can be secret societies. So all these 12 houses are on that piece of paper that has the chart on it. But the way I like to look at the chart is it's a story. And the chart is like a stage. And the planets are actors. And there's props, there's settings, there's locations, which you all see in this chart through understanding what the planets are and understanding what the signs and the houses, how they all interrelate. So
something I
it
want to
kind
ask
of-
you. I want to ask you real quick, if you don't
Yeah.
mind. And it almost
No.
sounds a little bit like a kind of what you're getting at here. Something that I've always been in the mind of, like I had, or the, I've thought of this. After messing around with magic and having experiences with it, I started to come to the belief that a lot of these gods they're not really exist in the way that most people think they are, and that they're more of like kind of like an archetype for a story, or for a meaning, or for like a result of like change in the universe, or like all that stuff, like and like I've been getting into people from like the 15 and 1600s, a little bit earlier around then, that were like geniuses with this stuff, and were actually well known for just having such in-depth I guess knowledge on these topics. And they were all saying the same thing too, that like these things, these gods and these names are really just kind of like part of a much bigger story that it's just being used to tell. And I kind of feel like what you were saying with the astrology, like it's much more behind it than like these silly gods that we envision when we like look at these things.
Right. I look at them as energies.
Yes, yeah.
But as the ancients understood, everything was what do they call that? Anthropomorphized, or it took on a shape and a personality, because it's easier to tell a story than to talk about an energy. It's easier to tell a story about a personality,
like
than to just persona. Exactly.
Personify, yeah.
Right. So, but that's really what you're looking at. And it's part of all of us. We all have 12 houses in our horoscope. We all have planets somewhere. We all have a second house of values and money. We all have a moon. We have a Saturn. And, we're all in this big soup together. So it's amazing what it can tell you specifically based on the time for which you construct the chart. And you can construct a chart for so many things, and it's going to tell you what it's about. Most people are familiar with the birth chart at the moment the child is born, if you're lucky enough to get the exact time from your hospital or your mother. But what I work with are charts of events, because a crime is an event. And there's a little different look at how to interpret those, because a birth chart is a person's life. It's their potentials. It's what they're going to do well at, what they're going to struggle with. And those are not black and white values. The person grows and changes and learns and whatever. They develop themselves. A crime chart is black and white. Some things in a crime chart are just bad. You would not, as an astrologer, tell your client, this is really bad and you got to change this, and your life is really going to be screwed up. And you don't do that. You can do that in a crime chart, because it is it's a tragedy. If somebody got injured, somebody lost their life, and it's in a way easier to focus in and make the value judgment of what is good and what is bad, because crime is bad. You're starting off in the negative side of things, so that's the difference. But the thing about these planets and signs and houses is they represent hundreds of things. So you have to know the frame of reference of the crime. You have to be discerning about, was Mercury, was the messenger god because he was small and he was fast. The planet Mercury is small. It goes around the sun faster than any other planet. It goes around the sun in like 88 days. So it's a really fast cycle. Yeah, it's a very fast. So that's why everybody talks about Mercury messenger. Yeah, because he was fast.
Yeah, see, and that's the 8th sphere on the Tree of Life, Mercury.
Yeah, right. They do all fit on that Tree of Life, which is something I don't know the Tree of Life. So that's where you kind of fill in my knowledge, because I'm familiar with it, but I don't know exactly where the things fall.
Oh, you said now that 88's that's the fastest? There's nothing fastest?
It circles the sun. In other words...
Like there isn't one that does it in 22 days, is there? Or 22 years?
Oh, no.
Okay,
no.
All right, no, I'm just...
Mercury's at 88 days around the sun, zip. And so that's why... See, the thing is, we all know astrology. We just don't know that we know astrology. But we know Mercury. we've heard of Mercury messenger and the winged Mercury, the god of carrying messages. It represents communication. It represents the thought process. It represents travel because he can move around fast. So all that comes out of your third house, and that's generally Gemini. Mercury rules Gemini, which rules the thinking. A Gemini person can be very scattered in thinking, but they also can be very talkative.
Oh, real quick, now that's the twins too, right?
The twins, yeah, Gemini's the twins. And I'll get into that with some of the fixed stars because that's kind of spooky stuff.
That's exactly what
some of the twins are like. They're not nice twins.
No, see, that's exactly what I think in the Matrix. When you have Neo fighting those twins. And they're like going down the highway and they're having those shootouts, and then like they end up in this red house that to me, in that whole section, you watch the eighth sphere jump in the chariot, go into the line between the eighth sphere and Gabor, which is now the red sphere, that is associated with weapons and chains, and then you see Neo and the twins fighting in a red house that has weapons and armor and chains and all this stuff all over the wall. So like I even think like, when they're fighting twins, and then on the chariot car there is twins on the front of it sometimes. So I sorry for that whole thing, but like I've seen that even in the Matrix. I believe that like we've even seen that part. And
There's
stuff associated
twins,
with Mercury using the twins to whatever.
Right. And the thing about the twins that's so fascinating is that the constellation Gemini concerns two brothers, Castor and Pollux. And you can locate them from Orion. These guys all surround Orion. Mostly what I'm talking about ends up surrounding the Orion. Castor and Pollux were two boys. Castor was a good boy. He was dependable. He was the responsible son. Pollux was the troublemaker. So there was this duality with these two boys, one being kind of good, the other one was not so good. And as they play out in the fixed stars, I have seen in the crime charts two individuals, one, pretty upright, steadfast person, the other one not so much. And I'm going to talk about that. Actually, Nick, if you want to check your email, I just did send you a chart that you can post. I sent it to your Gmail,
awesome.
I think.
Yep, I got it right now. I'm downloading
Marilyn Monroe's death chart. Because
I'll pull it up in a second.
Amazing.
The twins are in there, and that it's like freaky how they play out in the death chart of Marilyn Monroe. I'm skipping ahead. I wasn't going to do her right away, but this is all stream of consciousness anyhow. So we'll just do it. We'll just do it. Because we're talking about the twin brothers, right? Now, in the death of Marilyn Monroe, and I believe she was murdered, and I wrote about that in one of my books. She was murdered by a hot shot injection. And I did a ton of research on that. And that was when I first discovered I love doing research. And I was able to do more writing because of the love of doing the research. So in the chart, when Marilyn Monroe passed away, obviously a lot of stuff was kept undercover. But when I did the chart, there we go. I don't know if you want to see. I know this probably isn't going to make too much sense, but I'm pointing out this is an event chart. You see your 12 houses starting from the left, which is actually the eastern horizon. It's flipped. This would be east the way we're looking, but this is the eastern horizon where the sun rises here. Houses go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Go around counterclockwise, starting from the dark line on the left. What you look at in this chart is what is the sign on that, which we call the ascendant, right there in the far left line. Now, what is there, which is really kind of scary, is the sign Cancer, and it's at 22 degrees. Everything is indicated at degrees of a circle of 360. There's 30 degrees to each sign. So the sign will go from 0 to 29. Then it'll go to the next sign, 0 to 29. So
is that
we have.
Mercury? That's not Mercury, isn't that 22 degrees? Is it in the?
Wait,
in
I'm
the
trying
first
to.
house?
Wait, I gotta look at. Let me look at my own reference over
Sorry
here
about
because I
that.
can't see that.
Didn't
That's
mean to
okay.
Screw you up there.
Let me look at. I have it on my phone here. Let's see. Mercury is at 19 Leo.
Okay.
Mercury is down. You see this little upside down U. Then you see the sun glyph, and then you see Mercury, which has a little hat on. Mercury's 19 Leo.
Gotcha.
That's telling me there were a lot of people in that house when she died. Okay, but going back to, and there were a lot of people in that house that we didn't know about.
Not to like interrupt you again, but like, you know, I always say Tahuti's path is from Mercury to the Sun and then to Jupiter, or Hod, Tiferet, and Chesed, and Leo is for Tiferet. That is for the Sun. So like I'm even seeing again like Mercury and the Sun. That's supposed to be a connection, in my opinion. In my opinion, in Tahuti's path, that is part of it's going to show up on his way there.
You know what?
There's going to be an exit for Tiferet at one point. And Leo should be there.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And Leo should be there, so sorry, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So the ascendant here, 22 degrees of Cancer. Cancer tells us that the victim is an extremely famous, world famous person. But it also tells us something else. The fixed star for the Gemini, the twins, Castor and Pollux, remember what I said, they were two brothers. One was very good and powerful. Yes.
Yeah.
She is sandwiched between Castor and Pollux at 22. One is at 21 Cancer, the other one's around 23 Cancer. When I saw that ascendant and the two brothers, I thought, oh my God, she was having affairs with, well, she had an affair with JFK first, and then he dumped her, and then she went to Bobby Kennedy, who was in her house the night she died.
Right.
And along with her, a couple of doctors, her housekeeper, Eunice Mary, who was threatened and told a string of lies that could be disproven if anybody really tried to. And Eunice Mary had family members there in the house. So, and she was doing Marilyn's laundry at 3:00 in the morning because the bed sheets had been stripped off the bed and laundered. Now, why do you do laundry at 3 a.m? Marilyn's pronounced dead around 4:30. What on earth? And the house had been ransacked because Marilyn had this red diary. And she was writing down what the Kennedys were, the pillow talk that she was having with the Kennedys. And they were like, oops, we can't afford this to get out, because she was very angry by that time at both of them because they had dumped her and in a very unceremonious way. And so she's sandwiched in this chart between two brothers. When I saw that, I was like, oh, there it is. So, and further on, if you look at the chart, there's indications of death by poisoning. She died of an overdose of chloral hydrate, but her stomach was empty. It had to have been done by injection, and she had so much of it in her bloodstream. If she had ingested it orally, she would have died way before she could take that much. She would have died before she ever swallowed as much as they found in her bloodstream. So it had to have been an injection. There were bruises on the body consistent with being pinned down so that you could give an injection. And the house was ransacked, and there's a lot of stuff. I don't even know that she died at this particular time, but this is the particular time that the police were called by her doctor, I believe after he shot her up with chloral hydrate. And so this is how the fixed stars give you information in a crime chart. And what else do I want to say about Castor and Pa? She had such a cool quote. She had complained about the way she was being treated by the film studios. And she said, as a star, all I demand is my right to twinkle. Which I thought was really cool.
I like that.
So that's Marilyn. I wrote that up in my first book. It was one of the very early charts that I did using this technique. And it scared me because I was like, wow, if we can get this from famous people when we know mostly circumstances surrounding their death, then I started to use it for missing people to see if you could find them. Where did you find them? What happened to them? And so on. And one that I did very early on, I think it was 2004, I did one for a girl that went missing, and it was all over the news. She went missing out in the West somewhere. I think it was Utah. And I did the chart, and it didn't look dangerous. And I thought, I don't think anything bad happened to this girl. But everybody, the media were speculating, oh, she's probably assaulted and murdered, and they're looking for her body. And I was like, no, she's alive. She's alive, because the chart's not telling me otherwise. That girl was Elizabeth Smart. She was found 18 months later. She was found that she had been kidnapped and abused and molested, but she was not killed. And when I saw that, I thought, oh, you can definitely use this with missing people.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. It is. But there's ways to look and see the relationship with what rules death in the chart, what rules sexual abuse or assault. All these things you kind of learn what are the planets that have governance over that. So anyway, that was Elizabeth Smart, and it's really nice when you do a missing person chart and they're alive. It's such a good feeling, because you go into it thinking, oh, this sounds like it's not going to turn out well. So it's nice when it does turn out well, and that she was returned to her family. The first one I ever did, my very first crime chart, was the Lindbergh baby kidnapping. And that one I knew a lot about because I had a roommate who was a history major, and she was doing a lot of research into that crime. This was the crime of, people who don't know, Charles Lindbergh was a very famous aviator. He was the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic. This was in 1927. And he became an instant rock star. Everybody was crazy about him. He was like famous beyond belief, to the point where they bought a house in the countryside of New Jersey just to get away from the media. And I don't live too far from where that is. I know that town very well. It's a beautiful little country town, gorgeous old colonial homes and Victorian homes. And so that was where the kidnapping took place. One night, somebody kidnapped his baby son, Charles Lindbergh Jr., out of his crib. And the boy went missing for a long time. There was a ransom out on him and a ransom payment made. And baby Lindbergh was found dead in fields a couple miles from his home. I think it was about 2 or 3 months after the kidnapping. So here you have a kidnapping and a murder and the participation of servants in the household. What people also suspected, not so much then because Charles Lindbergh was untouchable. Later on, he turned out to be a Nazi sympathizer. He cheated on his wife. He fathered many children from German women out of wedlock. He was a complete POS, but nobody told you that when he was alive. He was such a big hero. And back in the 1930s, heroes were protected. They weren't exposed the way they are now. So anyway, when I did this chart, it spoke heavily of influence in the kidnapping by the servants, because the 6th house in the chart rules servants, and there was a lot going on in that 6th house. But what I also saw was there was one fixed star, and that came from the constellation of Cetus, which Cetus is a whale. There's a lot of animal constellations in the sky. Cetus is a whale, but it's not like we think of Save the Whale now. They were sea monsters. People were afraid of whales because they destroyed ships and sailors. And so it was a very scary monster type of a constellation. The star in this constellation was, they all basically have Arabic names. Baton Kaitos, yeah. So what happened was when the baby's body was found, he had a huge skull fracture. And they thought, well, he either was dropped, they speculated that he was carried out of the 2nd floor bedroom window on a ladder It either fell or he was dropped, or somehow his head was crushed, and that's how he died. Later research found that he was missing all of his internal organs, and they wrote that off as animal foraging. But I read a book last year, which is an amazing book called Suspect One by Lisa Perlman. It is, if you're interested in the Lindbergh kidnapping, the book is a must read because she took the autopsy reports and found that the child's organs were not ravaged by animals. The heart had been expertly dissected and removed. It had scalpel marks. It didn't have bite marks or teeth marks. So to go back on that, now she thinks, the author thinks, that Lindbergh was involved in the kidnapping and death of his own son, and I believe it. Oh. Anyway, we go back to the fixed star, Baton Kaitos. So the baby had a skull fracture. Now, Baton Kaitos meaning is portends, falls, and blows. And it was in the portion of the child was Venus in Aries. Venus, okay, a small child. Aries rules the head. Venus in Aries in that crime chart was in a really dangerous configuration. So it was an accident to the head. And so that was borne out just by Venus and Aries in a bad combination. But with Baton Kaitos, there was right next to Venus. I think it was the same degree of the sign as Venus, which was 21. So it was a crack, a blow to the skull of the baby. And that's that one. What else am I looking? And also, this is another one. It also, the stars reference a lot of different things. One of the things that Kaitos referenced is also sore throats, problems with the chest. Well, the chest had been opened because his organs were removed, and the baby had a cold when he was kidnapped. He had a chest cold. So again, the star's telling you the circumstances of involving the baby on the night that he was kidnapped. Here's another thing that was in that chart was the portion of the chart that rules the father. This was probably my first one that I ever found, and I was freaked out by it. The exact place in the chart that rules the father was right next to the constellation Altair, or it's called Aquila. That constellation is called the Flying Eagle. Charles Lindbergh, because he was such a great aviator, his nickname was the Flying Eagle. So his nickname was the same name as the constellation that describes him in, yeah.
You'll see, I even think, as silly as it sounds, even this whole Osiris-Rex comet in the Rex and Gilgo Beach, I'm sorry, there's something going on there.
Oh, yeah. The thing with Osiris is an interesting. Let me go into the story of Osiris because it's kind of funny. Osiris is probably one of the most well-known. It was the constellation I would go star hunting for with my telescope because it's very identifiable. It has the 3 stars perfectly lined up that form his belt. And it's mind-blowing that those stars that perfectly line up and form his belt are a gazillion miles apart from each other. And yet, from our perspective from Earth, they form a belt. The 3 line up, and then there's his shoulder, and then he has a sword on his belt. And if you looked at his belt, trace the line down to the left, it points exactly to the Sirius, the dog star, and Canis Major. And then you have Canis Major, the dog, and Canis Minor next to it. And those are his hunting dogs. They go with him everywhere. They're in the sky next to him. And so with Orion, he was a great hunter. He was a huge guy, and very, very full of himself. They used to always like to punish people who got too full of themselves in mythology. The sin of hubris, they always got after them and cut them down to size. So Osiris had a fangirl. Her name was Aurora. Aurora was the sister of Apollo and Diana. Diana, goddess of the moon, and Apollo was also a god. And Apollo did not like Orion. He didn't want his sister tagging along to Orion. So he shot Orion in the head with an arrow. And one of the stars in Orion's head is dim, and they say that he was blinded by this arrow. But that didn't kill him. What killed him was he would not stop bragging about how he could tame any beast, he could take down any beast in the world, no matter its size. So he's surrounded by Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, and above him is Hydra, the snake, and all these animals around him, besides his hunting dogs. Well, Zeus got annoyed and tired of his bragging. So along comes a little scorpion and bites Orion on the foot, and he dies. This great hunter was leveled by a little scorpion, and Scorpius, the constellation, is right above him. When he sinks down below the horizon, which is symbolic death, when the constellation drops below the horizon, either into the ocean, wherever you are, or whatever the land, it's symbolic death.
I think,
and Scorpio's above him.
I think Scorpio, it's being associated with Mars, which would then fit like on Gaboro, the fifth sphere in the Tree of Life. I do think Scorpio being like associated there. I think going up higher on the tree, it's actually showing you that death is a part of what's going to happen in a change.
Yes, it does. Mars actually is a co-ruler of Scorpio, which does rule over death and rebirth as well, because Orion was brought back. The constellation near him is Ophiuchus, was a doctor who wanted to save Orion, so he cured him of the scorpion's venom and he brought him back. He was redeemed. Like I said, they all get redeemed. They get punished and then they get redeemed. So Ophiuchus is always associated with like herbal healing, medicinal healing, because it was this doctor who saved Orion.
Well, it's funny how this story, even to me, sounds like a mixture of an Egyptian story. Like you have Horus, who did lose an eye at one point, but then you have Osiris, who fell apart, and Isis put back together. Like,
Well, Orion
weird.
was Osiris to the Egyptians. He was Osiris and Horus at the same time. So
he's getting both stories.
I think there's another version of the story also where Artemis, in the Greek version, she kills Orion accidentally. Well, there's two versions.
Yeah,
she killed him accidentally, or he was trying to rape her, and so she killed him.
That's probably the latter. I mean,
just saying. I don't know. Supposedly they were, quite the hunting power couple. So,
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, there are alternate stories depending on where they come, where it originates from. Greece, the Romans had their take on it, the Greeks had, and of course the Egyptians from way before them had already pegged him as Osiris. So there's a lot of mix and match with a lot of the myths. There's, change over the centuries. But so the other thing about this Lindbergh case was not just the flying eagle, but the fact, this is so crazy, the fact that Zeus, all right, there was this young boy Ganymede. He's not a constellation. He's what we call an asteroid, which is a planetoid. It's not a planet, but it's a planetoid, and they are also used in astrology. I don't deal as much with them because there's hundreds of them, and I'm still, I want to become expert at one thing at a time. But Ganymede represents, if you have Ganymede in a crime chart, it could represent a kidnapped child. So the way Ganymede works into the story of the eagle, Zeus liked this boy. He wanted him as his servant boy and God knows what else. He took Aquila the eagle and swooped down, and they stole Ganymede. They kidnapped Ganymede. Zeus brought Ganymede into his home where he became like a gopher. He would carry water and stuff. Ganymede becomes Aquarius, the water bearer. He becomes Aquarius. And Charles Lindbergh, who was the flying eagle, was also an Aquarius. And his son was kidnapped. So you have Ganymede working its way into the Lindbergh story, which is a kidnapped little boy by an eagle, by his father, the flying eagle. So
Andy was German. Gotta get that eagle.
He was German. He was a Nazi sympathizer. Yeah, he was bad news. So that's.
I just want to add real quick. The whole thing with talking about eagles and flight, and even back to Horus, and for one, I do think sometimes when we see archers in artwork, it might be referencing maybe to some sort of tale that goes along with this, besides other symbolism. But, I have even said, just in my opinion, when it comes to magic, part of maybe the physical side effects or change that happens is that I do think you may change your pupils. One may get smaller and the other one may get bigger or whatever, but there will be a difference. Like one is bigger, one is smaller. Fuck, I forgot where I was going with that. Shit.
That with the archery? Archery?
Oh, yeah. Well, when you get into that, yeah, with your eyes. Technically, now your eyes. I think if I'm correct, and Lisa will probably correct me if I'm wrong. One would be flight and one would be fight. You'd actually be in both at the same time, which in my opinion would be like a bird, as in Horus, going to go fight. He's flapping his wings. He's not flying away. He's flying to go fight at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So I do think that is why there might be that maybe is used to go along with the change of the eyeballs.
It's interesting.
He's not flying. You're actually taking off or rising up, and you're fighting at the same time. Just like Gabura. Two of the things that can be used at Gabura, which is where I think, you start taking off, and you would actually be in this whole thing with Horus flying and fighting. There is two things that can go along, two symbols that can go along with that sphere, and one is chains, and one is a spear. The chains is going to keep you grounded here, or you're going to alchemy, transmute that into a sphere, and keep going forward and fight. You're not afraid. You're not fearful. You're actually charging into the darkness. Zero idea what's fucking ahead of you, and you're saying, fuck fear, I'm going for it. Flight and fight at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my whole thing with why I think you'll get birds and archery and the same story and fighting.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting too. Like the newer NASA missions are all Artemis missions.
Mm-hmm.
Like the recent ones. First it was Apollo. Now it's Artemis. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like an evolution.
Yeah. Weird.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, even think the whole path inside the eyeball as you're going back, it's getting darker and darker too. You're definitely going into the darkness.
Well, and Apollo and Artemis were twins.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we were
It
talking about
could
twins
be just
before.
the polarity of that one person. That's even the whole thing I think with the twins in the chariot, is that you have you have both polarities, the male and the female, in some sense, or both polarities of the tree, and you're actually wielding control of them now, and that's how you're going to move up them. So.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to get on a whole other tangent, BDs.
It reminds me of the manipulation of the lens, like either contracted or fattened, depending on the either you're flying away or you're going to fight, the focus or the unfocused, the distance or the close up.
You know what? I even think that to go even farther, sometimes some of the chariot cards, I think it might be Crowley's, it looks like it's destroyed at the end, like the wheels are coming off. That is because I think no longer are the wheels yoked anymore. They have gone unyoked, just like your eye. One will be bigger, one will be smaller. That means they had to actually turn or change, not the same way anymore. And that would cause your wheels and everything to bust off because it's not working correct.
Mm-hmm. Isn't the Chariot Tarot card, is that, I'm forgetting if that's Gemini or Mercury, do you know? The Chariot Tarot card is some...
Oh.
I
know this, right?
Forget.
I'm just talking about it so
I
much.
think so. But the interesting thing about the Gemini is it could be 2 or it could be 11. And so it's kind of an inversion thing because you have 2 either way. I brought that up when I was talking about the spec thing with the door and the evidence tapes on the door that formed the 11. And then it said the 9 nurses at the top of the Life magazine. So it referenced 9/11. Like back in friggin' 1966. But the 2 and the 11 sort of are inversions because they could be shown two ways. You could the numeral 2 or the Roman letter 2, which is the way you look at Gemini. The zodiac sign of Gemini is the two pillars, like. So, but I don't remember what the Chariot. It would make sense if it was Mercury, but I'm not sure about that card.
All right, I'm going to look it up. I should know this. And that's like even another thing. If you're correct, I can't remember if it was the Golden Dawn or the Toth deck. Might have even been the Toth deck where I was saying that I think the wheels are busting off. I think there's even 2 poles, like behind the dude who's in the Chariot as well.
Yeah,
I think that's why eventually you go from the Chariot to then eventually you have the king who's just sitting there in something now. The wheels have broken off the Chariot, you know what I'm saying? And the story's changing,
BD, I was going to ask you something. Wasn't the incident of the Lindbergh baby like sometime in the spring, March or something like that? And go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, March 1st, 1932.
And isn't like the Orion constellation like barely reascending because what is it? Like in the winter time, we see the constellation of Scorpio in the night sky, and then it's like spring, summer, we start to see the constellation of Orion finally emerge or something. Or am I getting that confused?
No, in the we're in the northern hemisphere. Okay. It is January, February. Which is interesting because by the end of February, it is going to be receding. It is going to be disappearing. Okay. So, because I know that because I used to bundle up and go out at midnight with my telescope when I was a kid and look at Orion. And it was freezing cold because it was January and February. So those are the maximum exposure of Orion is the winter sky. So what you're saying does follow, though, because he's disappearing when this kidnapping takes place.
Yeah, I remember them talking about something in the Hunter or something with March or something like that.
Yeah.
It's the Lover's card with Gemini on it. My bad.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah. Well,
that is interesting too.
Now I'm wondering what is the Chariot? Which one is it?
Oh yeah, the Chariot. No, sorry, my bad. Chariot goes from Gabora to Binah, which I mean, again, with the whole fighting, I mean, you even have the Hanged Man before then. So, I mean, like, you do get the whole death, and then I think, like I was saying, like, you're charging into the darkness, which would be the next sphere up, which would be black. The whole fight and flight thing as you go up the tree. And in my opinion, that is, like, really a better spot to, I think, symbolize your eyeballs going unyoked, because at that point, you are going to cross the abyss, and there will be a death and a rebirth, like I was saying, from Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole, like charging, like in terms of fighting and flighting at the same time, it's almost like hunting. You're charging forward, you're fighting, and then you're going to make a kill, and then you're going to harvest it.
I think Predator movies are very much on this whole thing too as well. I even think them fighting the whole last Predator movie with him, the Predator and Native Americans, was actually a very occult story in my opinion.
Very.
Yeah, that's it. All right, so back to you. I'm sorry. I totally took us all off with that whole thing. My bad.
No, this is great. It's interesting.
Yes, it is. It's very interesting.
I mean, the more you talk around it, the more it just falls into place. Here was another one that. Oh wow, I got for a while into the charts of disasters. I got away from people. And I looked at disasters because the ancients had these complex systems of when you should sail your ship and when you should not sail your ship. And it was all based on the constellations and the stars. They didn't have computers. That's all they had to go on. So they had these elaborate rules, one I remember offhand. When the moon is rising is a really bad time to set sail because the moon is inconstant. It moves too quickly. It changes. So you don't want to set sail when there's not stability beginning your trip. So they heavily used it when they were traveling. So I started to look at plane crashes. I started looking at plane crashes, and I started trying to apply those same rules, which held true to an amazing extent because once again, the Flying Eagle, Altair, in TWA Flight 800 off of Long Island years ago. That took off at a really bad time. And Altair, which is rising, it's a flight of the Eagle, it was destroyed. And there was another star in there, which belongs to the constellation Pegasus, the winged horse, the horse that flies. That star was in a bad position in relation to the rest of the chart. It was in relation to planet Uranus can rule accidents. It's a heavy outer planet, and it was afflicting. We call it afflicting when it's, not at a good position. It was afflicting these two fixed stars. So TWA Flight 800 had not a good takeoff chart. And then there was also one star is constantly shows up in air disasters, and that is called Denebola. That is in the tail of Leo the lion. And it literally, when it's in trouble in the event chart of the crash, this is what the ancients said about Denebola: misfortunes from water and vehicles of conveyance. It's aircraft. Misfortunes from aircraft. If it's afflicted in that particular chart at that particular time, which it was the Air France Airbus. It was in the sinking of the Titanic, which also referenced the exact same configuration as, I don't know if you guys remember, this is a while ago. There was a cruise ship, the Costa Concordia. It was an enormous luxury cruise ship, and it sank off the coast of Italy, but it didn't just sink, it fell on its side. It was this massive cruise ship that fell on its side because the captain was bringing it too close to shore, and it ran aground, yeah, and it just fell over on its side. It was a massive disaster.
Yeah.
The captain went to prison. Now, the thing that star was Denebola, it's an Arabic name. What it really initially meant was somebody going away from instructions, somebody not doing the right thing. Well, the captain was not supposed to bring it aground. It was stupid. It was not in the protocol for running that ship. So that translates to when you're at risk and you do something, you don't follow instructions, and you go outside the line of the rules, you have a disaster on your hands. And that's pretty much the literal meaning of Denebola, is the misfortunes, because you didn't use your head in guiding your vehicle. And so I found that in a couple I'm looking at now. Yeah, the Denebola, oh my gosh, it keeps coming up and up. That one, capsizing and drowning. It also has the meaning of capsizing and drowning.
Whoa.
It was prominent in the death chart of Natalie Wood, because I did her chart as well. When Natalie Wood drowned, which,
Whoa.
I'm sorry, it was
Have
not
you looked
an
at a lot of
accident.
smiley face killers at all? I mean, but you
I'm,
know what?
I'm thinking about it.
The problem with that, though, is that, you know what? Like, it could have possibly have been the day that they actually died, the date. And you may never actually find that out. Unless, the thing is, then, depends on how conspiratorial you want to get into it. That's maybe not so much the news's fault, but maybe the day that the body finally does get found might have been, purpose.
Yeah.
Handed to you.
Right.
But I'm wondering about that. Like I'm saying, the only problem may be is that finding the actual death date may not really work too well.
No, you know what? I'm glad you brought that up, because that is important. And yet we almost never know when somebody was actually killed. Here's what we use. We don't use, when I say death chart, I could be referring to the time of the 911 call. I will refer to the time they were last seen alive, or some documentation of that. You don't know when somebody was murdered. We don't know when the smiley face guys were murdered, but we know when they were last seen. Mm-hmm. There's a record of the time. That's what we use when we're doing missing persons. We use the last seen. It is remarkably descriptive, because most of these, I had the time of the plane crashes because that's documented. But in some like Marilyn Monroe, I had to use the 911 call. I don't know when I think she died earlier than what we knew, but the 911 call tells you, because it's the birth of an event. It is made manifest
to
the
makes
world.
sense.
No.
So that's what we use. Because I'm glad you brought that up, Nick, because we don't know when most people ever got murdered. We have to backtrack and put together the last scene, and or the last text message. Text messages are great in crime charts. Last time they sent a text message or made a phone call.
Well, at least the events are in motion, right?
Right.
So
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's not a static picture. There's a lot of crimes are impulse, bang, it happens and it's over. But like I remember when I was looking at the chart of 9/11, I saw things that had already happened in the past, and I was like, wait a minute. And I thought, wait a minute, this was not on that day. A plane just flew into the world trade and crashed. This was massive planning in advance. This was massive financing and planning in advance. And so the main impetus was actually the week before the 9/11 disasters. And I saw that in the chart, and I realized, you know what? This is an event in progress. You can't freeze every crime and say, boom, this is it. And no, they were planned. And the more, like I said, the more generational the crime, there's a bit of effort that went into it. It didn't all happen on one day. So what you begin to see are the participants, which are the other planets, and where they're placed could be the perpetrators, could be a car, it could be a pet, it could mean, they mean so many things. That's where you have to use discernment when you're looking at it. Could describe a weapon. It gets remarkably descriptive. It just describes the color of something.
This is why I like JJ, a shout out to JJ Vance, Operation GCD podcast. He was just saying, he's like, he really likes this stuff, and he's very interested in it. And he said, he would be interested in your analysis of the smiley face killers in Idaho 4. And this is exactly why I kind of wanted to have you on when we do our next one, is because I think maybe with your birth charts or your death charts, or however you want to look at them, if you have any for this, JJ and like Ron are both really good with knowing other ends of like behind the scenes stuff, especially with finance or this and that I'm wondering, like, if there's things in these charts that they may actually be like, oh, that's right there. With this situation, you know what I'm saying? So I'm really interested in like finding out what kind of stuff we might be able to do.
It's so funny because somebody recently asked me, do you want to do smiley face? And I'm in the midst of doing a few podcasts here and there and trying to finish this the autobiography thing. And I said, yeah, that sounds great. I haven't touched it yet. I would need a lot of data, but when the more heads you put together, they could probably give me that data a lot faster than I could dig it out of somewhere. So that would be great. I would just need to know when and where were these men last seen, what time was their last phone call, text. They left a bar at 2 a.m. or where were they? I need the city. I need the time as exact as possible. And I would be happy to do that. And I'd be excited to work with other people that could add on to what I don't know.
Yeah,
I know about the crime, addition. But I don't know specifics. I have done cases where guys left a bar and went missing and were never seen again. And I did one quite a long time ago that was never solved. And that one is something I was going to revisit because I think I know now what I didn't know then. Because I'm always learning. I'm always adding on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely, smiley face would be a go for sure.
Something I do want to ask also, not to cut into where you were going before, but it is something I kind of guess I want to ask at this point. Just from listening to things that you're saying, and like I guess looking at stuff that I even point out with occultism, or I have with other true crime, and like you're going, and like again, we're going by like dates and times and stuff that we're being handed from the news or from court documents, you know what I'm saying, or reporting and stuff like that. Now, considering that, like, when we start doing that and we start actually seeing the same story going on in an occult or with astrology or however, like, we're looking at it, like, did you start to wonder, like, are we being handed this information because it matches this story? Like, do you ever start wondering, like, how is this happening? You know, like I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but like not saying that this stuff is fake. I'm not saying that this didn't happen, but it's almost like was it supposed to happen? And these are the facts we're giving you. So like it paints the picture in a way of what happened. You know, if you understand what I'm getting at, it's such a good
question. It's a perfect question, because that question is the reason I stopped doing these charts for a couple of years. I couldn't sort out anymore when something was a false flag. How do I figure that out? You can see deception in the chart. And what happened that brought me back around was the Richard Speck case, that crime chart. I don't think it happened at 11 o'clock. I went into that whole thing the last time when we talked. Yes, yeah. I don't think so. But the 11 o'clock chart was telling me that the whole thing was sort of fudged. The data was faked. So it did have value. But in that little interim between, you know, when I did my last book on forensic astrology, which was a 2016 already, quite a while ago, I stopped doing them. I said, I can't get this. I don't know how far I can go with this when these false flags are afoot and they're putting info out that is not accurate. How can I see that? And then I realized, no, you can see deception in the chart. That's where you need to pick up the thread. Look for the deception if you think that's what it is. So it's a great question you're asking me, because that has been a dilemma that I have had to deal with. Where do you look? Is it being packaged? Was it orchestrated? Because the Speck murders were most definitely orchestrated a certain way. So it is a good question. I think, though, I have gotten since then a better handle, because, listen, false flags are all over the place. I better learn how to figure them out. Yeah. Or hang up my hat, one or the other.
I still think it's a data point. I think it's a very valid data point when they say, oh, we got no data. Well, no data is still a data point.
Yeah, you know? because you can look at the source of the data in the chart too.
Right.
Which I wasn't never looking for that before, because you get historical charts, which also could be false flags that we didn't know about. But you start with a different perspective, and you can always find your answers somewhere. A chart is a closed system. It has all its components, you know. So I think that that's a great departure for Smiley Face. I think we'd still do quite a good job with it.
I think you could still triangulate the information that you do have, and then if something comes up as deception, you know that, okay, well, you know, that could be a data point that we triangulate away from, but or in the opposite direction of. So
yeah, I wonder if it could give you data to look somewhere else, like give you clues, like, okay, if this is coming up as deceptive or false, what else is in the chart that I can go check out, like just other angle or idea.
Or tease it out by variable. I'm sure this is not how you do it, but just look at the times, and if all the times are deceptive, then you know the time is deceptive. But maybe the event is not. It's just the time is.
Right.
You know what I mean? Or you know, the place is deceptive, but everything else is correct. As looking at them as independent variables. I don't. Just to guess. Yeah.
Well, you know, the funny thing is, I've recently learned a whole new system for how to look deeper at a different level than I was doing before. Not that I would discard my other level. It worked, and I'm always going to use it. But there's always different levels of how to look at this. Now that I have that figured out, I have more confidence in approaching these kinds of like fluky times and, you know, things that you're not sure when it happened, or you are sure that somebody deliberately, you know, changed some of the facts. Like I said, the truth is in there. The astrology does not lie. The astrologer has to know what they're doing, but the chart doesn't lie. You just have to find it, you know.
I wonder too, BD, maybe this is kind of like not a random question. It's related, obviously, but like the idea if stars specifically are, I always thought this as a kid, like if stars are entities or energies that are like trapped in a fixated point in the sky, possibly being punished or imprisoned for whatever reason, or they're like the watchers, you know? Mm-hmm. So do they influence humanity like energetically? Is that your opinion?
I don't really ascribe to the idea that anything in the heavens controls us or influences us. We are we're all biophotons. I mean, I'm a biophoton that could be 50 million miles away. Same thing. We are expressions of that. We're a synchronicity of that moment, of that energy. And I never like when people say, well, it was Mars. I killed somebody because my Mars was afflicted to Saturn. I mean, no, it didn't control you. It didn't do that. This is a homogeneous universe. You throw a pebble at Orion, it bounces back to, Scorpius or whatever. We are just responding to energies, and they're all around us. And that's how things get messed up when people start playing with frequencies, putting deliberate energies out there to throw us off track. I see it more as we're not controlled. We are just flowing through the energy all at the same time. And it's a difficult energy. We may have issues with it. But
Yeah.
I don't see if you, I don't know if you know what I mean. It's not we're influenced. Influenced, yeah, that's a better way, because I think it's also a vibrational thing. It's a frequency thing.
So I was going to say something about that.
And because the planets all vibrate to particular frequencies, and that's how they have the music of the spheres. They actually make sounds in space,
right,
because of their vibration. And I've done a lot of work in my life with vibrational healing. I have devices that emit frequencies that I've worked with for health and stuff like that, because I used to be an alternative practitioner, and I worked a lot with that. So I believe it's basically a question of vibrational healing, or vibrational frequency rather. And yeah, for sure they vibrate. And I don't know, for stars some stars are trapped. Some stars are in like worms. I don't know how to describe that. They are in all different types of situations out there. Some are different colors, different magnitudes, different strength. The red stars are cooler than the brightest stars are white hot. They're the hottest stars, the brightest magnitude. They're all different situations like we are. They're all different kind of, whether they're trapped or they are burning out or they are colliding with something or running out of gas. Yeah, they're all different situations. They're just entities like we are, just a different level.
You're both like, well, I think pretty much getting at the same thing, and pretty much the same thing that I'm going to say now. That I've even sometimes, like I was saying before, I wonder like if the story, sometimes with the numbers, I do think when you start getting all these like associations that match and just starts getting like really weird, I do think sometimes that story is real, but like the way it's being told to you is like ensuring the magical, like I guess, application to instill the fear or whatever it's supposed to do to people, like especially with Gilgo. Like I just think so much of it matched like the Thelemic stuff that at that point, and in my opinion, just with the amount of money that's kind of being made off of it in some form or another, I do wonder if to an extent, as part of it, like just to ensure that people are captivated with it and feel emotions tied to it, or puts them in fright, flight mode, completely, you know what I'm saying? Like, but, and then there's other times where I guess what you and Teresa were both kind of like going about with energies. Sometimes I've wondered, like, not so much like, not so much that we're in a matrix, but I guess like if you thought of the matrix idea, this would make more sense. But like, stuff that my boy Lee from Inner Guardians, he put it in a good way where, and going by things that he has said and then stuff that I have covered with gematria and ciphers, everything goes back to numbers because it equates to some sort of value in like energy or vibrational energy. That's another reason why, like, I think in the past, believe it or not, it seemed to be that when we had our alphabet, it actually automatically was associated with a number. That's how it was done, because it also equaled something, and you can start mixing things that equal something else, in my opinion. So, like, sometimes I wonder, is it like the energy from what these things supposed to mean to us is somehow like actually causing and just creating this horrible scene that we just been shown? You know, is it almost just like these are the energies that is needed for this type of horror to happen? Somehow it just comes along, and this is the side effects of that energetic value mixing with this or coming from there and all coming together. You get this guy, Brian Kohlberger, just walking to a house and slaying 4 people. This is what you have. That's what happens because of those energetic influences. You know what I'm saying? Or is it, deeper than that? You know? But sometimes I do wonder, like, it's when you get down to the numbers and you get down at looking at it like the way you are, it's like, for me, sometimes I find it like very even confusing about like, how do I look at the crime as it being like truthful and these people that died, but I'm very skeptic on certain ones, but I still give it the respect that, like, unfortunately these people probably died, but I have to question, why is it being handed to us the way that it is?
Well, I think there's something to be said for the psychic impact of a crime, which is manipulated and directed at a specific population. And I wrote about that with regard to Richard Speck murders, because that was so targeting young, independent, professional women setting out in life on a career, and they get horribly slaughtered. And you have to, in the times of that it happened, there was a women's movement was gaining a lot of traction, threatened a lot of people. You had nurses going on strike because they were sick and tired of being mistreated, underpaid, and overworked. And this was a psychic hit at all of that. Shut up and stay in your place, stay in your home, because if you want to go out and improve your life, if you want to take up a career like these nurses, you're going to get it. You're not going to be alone. You have no strength in numbers. So there's something to be said for the calculation of the impact of a crime. And that's very quickly molded into the aftermath or even before. And in the Speck case, it was before. I think the whole thing was deliberately, because they operate on different levels. You have the shock impact. They got rid of the girls because there was a viable threat of a whistleblower, because there was so much going on in that hospital. But there's also the psychic impact. Women were terrified to go out. Nurses didn't dare speak up against anything. So you have that level to it. Like I said, you have these patterns in these generational crimes, and that's a big part of it, is the psychic impact, that it affects a whole population of people. And that is engineered and manipulated, I think.
Well, it sends a message.
Yeah.
And it reverberates through time.
That's
forward.
That's like a thing that and I guess like the 2 cases that really make me wonder about this the most is probably like, Gilgo Beach and Idaho 4, you know, because of like the just massive amounts of cultism that's peppered all over this, all over these stories. And again, like I had mentioned before, like even people within the crimes themselves seem to be like, having ways of making money as well. Near the TV shows, GoFundMes. Some people who have these GoFundMes that are, supposedly victims of these crimes have already been arrested for like money scams. So it's like you have to start wondering. But like besides those people, and like this is just straight up the truth. And it's not like I'm specifically going to start throwing darts at people on YouTube. But when it comes to true crime, with those 2 cases, so much fucking money has been made on YouTube, pimping off death and trauma. And sometimes I think some of the people who do that are occultists and magicians, and they understand that it is actually magic being forced onto the masses, and they're riding that wave with it. And they are getting theirs because they know it has people captivated and in their feelings. Yeah. And they just have to keep repeating the same bullshit over and over again. And people are stuck watching it. You can have somebody who's brought up for the 20th time in the last 6 months. Oh, what about that 8-hour call? Yeah, man, we've talked about this 100 times already. You're just putting it up to get the fucking clicks because your occult listeners are obsessed with this situation, and you know that. So you know your 15-minute video will get 3 fucking thousand listens to shitty fucking commercials. And you take advantage of people who are stuck in a cycle and worship the person listening, who pretty much almost creates a cult and gives their listeners their own names, which is cultish in itself. Magicians will see this shit and pimp the fuck out of it as well. And I think that is actually a big sign of when there is magic and occultism behind the crime, because other magicians see what's going on and they ride the wave. I'm just being straight up. That's how it is on a lot of YouTube stuff.
For
They
sure.
siphon the energy off of it.
It's all a loosh-based system, right? So some people know how to take advantage of that or see opportunity. Magician or not, that's what they're doing, whether it's conscious or not, right?
That's actually brought to my attention how much occultism is even in it, is watching other occultists cover this shit. I'm like, oh, fuck.
Right?
Let me look at this even more.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why certain crimes get more in the public consciousness than others, right?
The work's already been done for them. I just got to ride the gravy train. I'm hitching a ride on this one.
Totally.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said for the effect of mass grief that feeds so many of these types. I mean, that they just thrive on it. This is the whole purpose behind a lot of it. That's why I said the psychic impact of the crime is the mass grief is an energy that a lot of these people thrive on. And so they just create it, recreate it over and over again and feed off of it. And that's why I think there's a lot to be said for true crime expanding the way it has exponentially in the past few years. It just burst out. There's a zillion true crime shows on television. What are they showing you? They're not being respectful of the families. They're showing the people breaking down crying. And I'll sit there and say, turn the friggin' camera off. No, they want to show the people crying. They want to show the misery. They want to show the funeral. And they want to show the balloons going up in the air and everybody's miserable. They don't need to do that. That, to me, is such an invasion. But that's the whole point.
That's not for nothing. But
negative, the energy that people feed off of from these catastrophes, you know?
Not for nothing, but this is a lot of reasons why, like, I guess, you know, I should have made this actually like a statement, I think, when I've done all of these shows, and I will make sure going forward. When I do cover them from an occult aspect, I'm not even so much denying the fact that this stuff didn't happen, but I'm telling you that there is a magician behind this and involved with this, and this is why people are in fucking love with this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Turn it off. These people or whatever happened are getting pimped out.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically Nazi magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Similar thing, right?
Very similar. Pimping out death and tragedy. Getting emotions going and making money off of it.
Goebbels would be so proud.
He would.
Sorry.
No, he would. You know what's funny? Sorry, I just thought of this so long ago, and I just thought it might be a good time to bring it up. Because you were talking about before, BD, about generational crime.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And you used the constellation, you said Cetus or something?
Yeah, the whale, yeah.
The whale, okay. Yeah. I don't know if you guys have watched The Fall of the House of Usher, that series on Netflix.
No, I haven't. Mm-mm.
Oh, okay. So if anyone's seen it, the granddaughter in the show, she calls Roderick, who's like the main like head of the family, she calls him Grampus at one point, and I was like, that's a weird name.
That's a name for some kind of a demon.
Krampus, right?
Well,
Krampus
not Krampus, Grampus with a G.
Right.
So I remember it sounds like it, and I looked it up because it was an odd word at the time, and it means like a very old killer whale.
Oh, wow.
And that whole show is about the generational crime and the fall of this
wow.
whole dynasty. So when you said Cetus, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. But
No,
yeah, we
this-
see it in pop culture, these themes.
The more you learn the symbols, the more you're going to start recognizing this, that, and the other. And it all connects. You might have to rip up a lot to find the tendrils connecting them underground, but they connect.
Absolutely.
They're in operation. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was there anything else that maybe you'd want to talk about before we wrap it up? Because I do know that we have another part to cover. So.
Yeah, no, I think actually I'm good. I covered.
Okay.
Oh wow! Wait a minute. No, you know what? I could do it next time.
Okay.
There was another one, but that's okay. This stuff just is on a continuum. We're used to talk about it in relation to magic, whatever we're going to do next time. Yeah.
All right. No, only because I am trying to actually get the episodes down a little bit. I'd rather do 2 episodes than have these longer ones.
Okay, sure.
So if that works for you, yeah, we could just wrap it up right here. I think
absolutely.
That was a great talk.
Yep.
And I, even that last question and the last discussion, I think it's for people who like to who are deep thinkers, like sometimes I do wonder. It's just like, yo, what is up with that? How does that stuff line up? It's very, very weird. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. So it's like watching the Code to the Matrix or some shit. I don't know.
Well, astrology is base 60, right? It's base 60 math, which comes from the Sumerians. Sumerians maybe got it from the Anunnaki, which is the Watchers. So,
oh boy,
I'm just saying, it's a possibility that
it's very possible. I often think it was downloaded from somewhere else in the universe. The knowledge was downloaded from somewhere else. But I will conclude on a note that references gematria, because you mentioned the numbers. I did run the planets, the gematria of the planets. Now, the planets all have a masculine, feminine quality, except for Mercury. Mercury is a real outlier. It's androgynous. Mm-hmm. But all the rest of them reduce to number 3. They reduce to number 3. I forget what Mercury reduces to, but it's not 3, but it makes sense because he is an outlier. He connects them, but he's not part of them. He's, like I said,
he's guy.
Yeah, he's a mischievous little winged monster. But they reduce to 3, so that's kind of an interesting note to conclude on.
That's interesting.
It is.
Yeah, it's something to do with Mercury being special. I'm telling you.
Yep.
Almost like the element, how he is so viscous and.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
You put some heat under his ass and he'll defy gravity.
Yeah, there you go.
Takes off with those wings, baby. Just give me those shoes.
Yeah, go straight up in that thermostat. I'll tell you that much.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much. Would you like to, BD, would you like to plug yourself again real quick?
Sure. You can find me on Twitter, BD Salerno. My handle is my whatever name is Star Sleuth. My website is strangebutTrueCrime.com. My books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any online retailer, under the author's name, B.D. Salerno.
Thank you very much. And I'll make sure I have
Thank
your
you.
links.
Thanks for having me. It's been great, guys.
Of course. And Teresa, would you like to plug your stuff again?
Yeah, man. Okay, check me out on the Spiritual Gangsters, Clown World Weekly. Hit me up on Instagram. It's just my name. All the links are down below, I'm sure.
Every Tuesday live, probably around 10:30 or whatever, around there. You will see. Yeah, yes, and you will see, because of the thing will probably be up a day or two before. But yeah, don't forget, it's also live. So come over there and join us. Yeah. And Lisa, thank you.
And hit Teresa up for one of these.
Yes.
Get yourself
I already did. I'm waiting for it.
I was gonna say thank you to you off air, but thank you for ordering it, and I actually sent it out yesterday, I think. So.
Oh, good. Yeah, thanks. I'm looking forward. When I get my camera and my setup fixed, I'm gonna show up with that hat on.
Yes, please. We should just all wear it next time.
We'll wear it next time.
I wouldn't put it on.
All right, you got a date. Okay.
Perfect.
It was funny when I was telling her, I was like, I got a guest going on, and I was like asking, if she'd be interested, and she's like, oh, who? And when I told her who, she was like, oh my God, she just bought a hat off of me.
I was like, yo, I know that name.
That's
So I was like, now I definitely have to come on.
Yeah, no,
It's meant to be.
yeah, next
That's
time
it.
for sure.
Awesome. Thank you. So,
Great.
and thank you, Lisa, for coming on.
Absolutely.
Again. Yes.
Thank you.
And again, you want to let people know where they could reach you on Twitter or Instagram?
At Lisa Solis. My handle's on Twitter. It's Lisa Solis. And so on Instagram, it's the same thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. I had a great day or a great afternoon for, I guess, the day before Thanksgiving Eve. Thank you all in the chat. Thank you, everybody, for the comments. That's what's up. Hit that like and subscribe if this is your first time coming across the show. And share it if you had enjoyed it. But again, thank you all for jumping in and for your comments. I throw them up on the screen, when I can. And, this is why I go live, is because I do appreciate the people jumping in and having comments to say and just adding or chit-chatting or whatever. And I always suggest you check out the live chat as well after the fact. So thank you to all of you guys as well who jumped on. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.